Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. My name is Mocha, and today I thought we could get a little more in depth into this kind of horror, kind of scarier stuff, since last week we covered The Corpse Bride, and while I love The Corpse Bride, I feel like I like more of a sci-fi, gory element to movies. So today we're going to be talking about Selene from Underworld. Now, to no surprise, a movie like this, they've pretty much laid out everything possible about the character, which made my researching really easy, because you could basically just watch the movies and know exactly what's going on. They tell, her backstory, and it's just really easy, basically. But the reason why I chose to do her character is because she is an absolute favorite of mine. When this movie actually came out in 2003, I was only 4 years old. So I obviously don't think I was watching it when I was 4, but I definitely watched it as a kid. I remember just loving the whole aesthetic of it, like a warrior that she is, and that's why I was intrigued to do it. Also, I hadn't really thought about these movies in a really long time. At least not that I remember. So in the first movie, we actually meet her 600 years after she's already been doing what she does. What she is she is a death dealer. So she's already well known within the group of vampires. She works for, the main coven. But her story is actually really sad when it starts out. We find this out in the end of the first movie, or at least towards the end of the first movie. And she finds out that she was actually betrayed by Victor, who was supposed to be a really big father figure to her. And it turns out, he basically ruined her entire family's life, ruined her life, and turned her immortal. And this is pretty sad because she trusted him and she works alongside him because, he's taken her under his wing. So we start out in modern times when we first see her. However, she is actually born in 1383 AD. So she comes from the 14th century, and she was born somewhere in Hungary. And I don't think I really saw much about her family. They never give names, they never specifically give details, but she did have a sister who was older than her, so she was the youngest of 2 girls in the family. And her father was a well-known architect where they lived, so it was pretty successful. I don't think I found anything about the mother. I think that she worked alongside him in some way, but I'm not really sure how. I just hate when you get lint stuck on your face. I don't know where this came from. Okay, so they're approached by Victor when she's about 6 or 7 years old, and Victor knows that the father is a really well-known architect, so he asks the father if he will work for him building a dungeon. And so the father takes the work, he does it. He ends up building a dungeon for Victor, which we find out in later movies. I'm not really going to go into too much depth about the rest of the movies because I'm focusing on her specific character. But if you do want to look at more, definitely link them below so that way you can find them on the internet and watch them. They're available right now actually on Netflix, I believe, because that's where I was watching them. At least I know that they have the first 3 on there, because I watched the first one and then the second 2 came up as a suggestion. Anyway, so the father builds this dungeon for Victor, which, if, again, you want to know more, you can watch the movies on what the dungeon is and what it's for. But time goes on, they just go back to living their normal lives. Nobody's really bothering them. There's, nothing going on. At this point, they're not really targeted. They're just kind of, living. But once the war starts between the lichens and the vampires, like the rising between them, and they start fighting a war, Victor finds Selene's family. He goes there, and at this point, Selene is 19 years old. So, this should be, I'm pretty sure this would be 1403. Yeah, 1403, she's 19 years old, and he ends up just completely murdering the family. Now, Victor did this because he felt that people would come around asking, questions about the dungeon and, wanting answers where it's at, things like that. So he kills the family to prevent them from ever being questioned and anyone ever finding out information about it. So he kills her family, but when he sees her, she has a very uncanny resemblance to his dead daughter, who he actually condemned to death for falling in love with a lichen, which is pretty much forbidden in their coven. So he spares Selene's life, and he ends up turning her into a vampire. Now, when it comes to vampirism, what I've found is, in these movies, it's not some cool thing. You don't just get bitten by a vampire and, you're just one of them. It's actually a virus. So not many people actually live once they're bitten. They don't actually live to make a transformation, and they end up just dying. But she ends up making the transition. And so she becomes a vampire when she's 19 in 1403, and Victor kind of takes care of her because, she resembles his daughter, who has been dead for a while now. And so she ends up working for the coven, and she becomes a death dealer. And in the first film, this is when we see her 600 years later, so 2003. And when we see her, she is actually hunting down lichens. Now, she has a personal vendetta with them, because Victor had told her that her parents were killed by Lycans and not by him. So she feels that she needs to, kill all of the Lycans, and, get revenge because she thinks that they killed her family. So when we see her fighting, she's very, very good. Obviously, you would know a thing or two if you were doing something for 600 years and were just kept going at it, So, there's this guy in the movie. I'm not too particular on how he came to, really liking of her or what, but Craven seems to kind of be that guy that, never stops bugging her, telling her they're meant to be together and stuff like that. I mean, probably just because he wants some point of power and he knows that, she's Victor's daughter in a way. But he was said to have killed Lucien, who, kind of orchestrated and put together, soldiers for the uprising when they had the war against the vampires and the Lycans in the first place. But Craven is supposed to be the one that killed him. So Selene finds out by following this pair of Lycans that are oddly following a human, and that's pretty odd behavior because, they don't... She's like, why are they following this human specifically? What are they doing? And she ends up finding out that there are actually tons and tons of Lycans under the city, and they're obviously doing something when she thought, they shouldn't be there and they shouldn't be, creating, putting forces together, basically. They're, supposed to be keeping away from each other, but they're obviously not doing this because she finds them all there, and she actually ends up coming face to face with Lucien. So she ends up waking Victor and showing him that, he lied. He didn't actually kill Lucien. Lucien's still alive. And they're doing something weird because they're targeting humans and they're not sure what they're doing with them. But, she wants to know, why is Lucien still alive, and why did Craven say that he killed Lucien when he's obviously alive? Now, Lucien and Craven were actually working together, and for whatever benefit for both sides, they agreed, that he would stay away from them and not, start a war again and all of this. So at this point, Lucien is getting real, tactical with what he's doing. He is taking humans and trying to find them related to the original bloodlines that created vampires and werewolves. The reason why he's doing this is because they are basically a host, and he wants them so he can create a crossbreed between the vampires and the werewolves. So that way they'll be much stronger, and he can use them to his advantage to overthrow the vampires. And so that's the gist of when we first meet her, what's going on in the movies and all of that. But something interesting that I thought you guys might find interesting as well, because I've been watching these, like I said, since I was a little kid. I was probably like 9 or 10 when I first saw these movies, and I absolutely just loved them. But she's actually based off of an X-Men character. I did not expect that. I guess she's like a villain in the X-Men. I didn't really look too much into it, but I'll definitely, as always, link it below if you want to read more about the X-Men character that she's based off of. And when I saw it online, she actually kind of does really look like this kind of like X-Men character. There are a few things that are like a little different, like obviously the outfit and where she's from exactly. I think in the X-Men she's actually from like, I think she comes from like Romania or something like that, whereas she's obviously from Hungary in these movies. But I thought it was interesting. I found this information in an interview where they're talking about how they created the characters, and they had like a whole behind the scenes look, and they show you how they make the werewolf costumes and stuff like that. And I was like a little bit not a little bit, I was really interested in that, because it's actually really great how they transform in the movies for being, you know, early 2000s. They did a really good job. I didn't actually figure this out until I actually read some kind of like fandom wiki, if you guys know what that is. It's basically where fans go in depth about the information that they find in movies and things like that. Kind of like I do with this channel. But on Fandom Wiki, I found some pretty cool stuff. They told me like different powers that vampires have. So obviously they're extremely strong to the point where they can literally just lift someone like a normal human. And that's like pretty insane, but really cool. Yeah, so Selene is extremely strong. And the reason why she is because she was sired by Victor, who is one of the elders in the coven. And I think he was actually recruited by Marcus, the original vampire who ran the coven. I think Victor was a warlord, and he sought out his help, and so he turned him into a vampire, and making him one of the oldest of the 3 of them that run the coven. So there's Amelia, Marcus, and then Victor. Now, she ends up getting super strength, super speed, but this comes with time also. The elders are only super powerful because of how long they've been able to develop their abilities, how long they've been able to basically just work with them. It's like a muscle. Like, the more you work it, the stronger it's gonna get. So they're extremely powerful. So do you guys think that this is kind of like a weird take on vampires and werewolves, or do you find it cool that they, instead of making it like, I don't want to say like romanticized, because like that's not what I mean, but like, does it seem cool to you that they made it like a virus instead of, you know, just anyone can get bitten and turn into a vampire like in other movies? They also don't have the normal downfalls of vampires, so like garlic, things like that. They can't turn into bats and fly around. I think that's cool too, because they're basically, the virus is like, a virus, so it turns them into someone who lives off of blood and has fangs and extremely pale skin. And the one thing that is the same is that they are allergic to ultraviolet radiation, so the sun. But there are a few exceptions in the movies, depending on, who exactly created the vampire and what kind of like strains they have in their blood. So there's been a few exceptions to the sunlight, but they are allergic to the ultraviolet radiation and it will kill them. But that's pretty much the only similarity to like classic vampires, I guess. I think it's super cool for the fact that, like, I don't think I'd ever seen something like this done. Where they're basically like humans, but like super strength and, because they can die of blood loss as well. If they get into like a real serious fight with a lichen or even another vampire, they will die from blood loss if they don't drink blood to restore it. So, they are pretty much human-like. And that's what I like about it, but they're just like humans on steroids, super strong. What are some interesting things that you guys found in these movies? There are a lot of like twists and turns within them, I feel like. Especially as they have new characters in the different movies. They all face different kinds of problems. I think my favorite thing is Michael Sheen, who actually plays Lucien. He is also Arrow in Twilight. The one that is in charge of the Volturi. And I found that like super cool because, I don't know, he just plays like he plays that role really well. Like the really scary, leader, and I just love it. Like when I found this out, I was like, why does that guy look so familiar? And when I found this out, I was like fanning over him and almost even wanting to turn my story to be on him instead of Selene, because maybe there's some kind of like timeline where they like switch up. I don't know how to explain it. Like maybe there's some kind of interdimensional thing going on. I'm gonna look it up and see what I can find, and if I can find enough to make like a good story out of it, then I'm definitely gonna do something on the cross characters of like Aro and Lucien, because come on, that's just so cool. But yeah, so Kate Beckinsale just absolutely crushed this character. I feel like she's been like a poster for like super sexy, she's always wearing like that leather outfit, and she's just like a badass chick that can like do everything herself in this movie, and she does. Like she brings down tons of people who are even stronger than her. She takes down Covenant, she's badass. Like, they had the right idea when they cast her for this. Although in the interview she said that she was very nervous to play this character because she felt like she didn't resonate with the character very much. Like, she did, but she didn't feel like she was this heroic, really strong, sexy character that they were making her to be. But she totally owned it in this movie, and I've absolutely been in love with her since I ever first saw these movies. Like, I always wanted to be her. I'm like, oh my god, she's so cool, and she kicks major ass. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think at some point I would like to do a full story, like a full evolution of her throughout the movies. But for the most part, I just wanted to kind of give you guys the basics of the character and, you know, what happened to her. How did she become a vampire? And I feel I've done that, so I totally would love to do, you know, like I said, like kind of go through the different movies and tell you how she evolves from movie to movie, because she definitely does, and there's a lot of different, you know, factors that come into play into, you know, the last movie and who she becomes throughout it. I actually really enjoy the first one because you see her start to kind of get a sense of humanity back, because when, you know, she sees them following this human, she ends up feeling something for him, and, you know, she starts to, you know, realize, like, I was a human, like, you know, she gets like a sense of who she was back. Not entirely, especially not in the first one, but that's when you first start to see her character kind of come through. So guys, today I wanted to do this really pale look. She doesn't wear much makeup other than, I'm pretty sure when I was reading they didn't even really put much makeup, you know, just whatever they needed to even out. But that all of the vampires' really pale-esque look to them was actually done after the fact. So when they're editing it, they actually put a certain filter over it that gives it that lighting that it has and gives them their really cool, really pale skin. But I actually like having this like really pale look. That's why I actually have this foundation that's like super pale. It's because I actually really like it. I think it's really pretty. Obviously it's not my color, that's the point of it. But it's very pretty. I really like it. So she always has this kind of like pink lip. She has very thin lips as well, so I just kind of went with my own because they're pretty small. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and share it if you like it. Please don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in next week's video. Bye!